Welcome to Astronomy Live. Tonight, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different, checking out some mysterious coordinates that were given to me. So, anyway, a little bit of background real quick. A few days ago, I received a private message from someone asking me to check out some orbital elements that somebody posted online. Here, I'll read them off. You guys can take a look here at what the telescope is seeing in the meantime. I'm going to pull up the window. Where is it? Here it is. So someone posted the following orbital elements. It was rather cryptic, but they said it was a tidbit. And they gave the mean distance, which is another way of saying semi-major axis, at 4.88, eccentricity 0.89738816, inclination 0.22871166, ascending node 11.2071156, argument of perihelion 86.68366086, mean anomaly 356.5476503, and the epoch at 24570334.65. So, that's a mouthful. What that is a set of orbital elements which would seem to indicate an object in space in an elliptical orbit around the sun on an impact course for Earth. Oh my. Now, your average hoaxer who claims that something's about to hit Earth generally doesn't produce orbital elements, or if they do, they usually don't actually indicate an impact with Earth. They generally don't know how to manipulate a set of orbital elements. Well, whoever did this does know how to manipulate a set of orbital elements, which is rather unfortunate, because the hoax looks fairly convincing if you're not familiar with what this is all about. If you actually look at the impact date, it's April 1st, 2015. That's real cute. So, yeah, it's probably an April Fool's joke come early. And they even said so later. But just to put this to bed for good, because these things take on a life of their own, I'm checking out those coordinates. So that's where the telescope's pointed right now, where that orbit predicts the object should currently be. It's drifting around a little bit here right now because I don't have it auto-guiding. Let me start that up. So, excuse me. Anyway, yeah, it's a bit unfortunate, as I said, because your average person is not going to have the means to debunk such a hoax. They're not going to have the means normally to know how to address it or, put their mind at ease. I'm going to have to calibrate. Calibrate. All right, give us a few seconds here. So anyway, I'm binning these images to get as much light as possible at the cost of resolution. We're not terribly concerned about high-res, high-quality pics here. We're mostly concerned about whether anything is actually there at the predicted coordinates or not. Now, there are a lot more stars that my telescope can detect than are displayed in my SkyChart program right now. I might have to update that database, try to get it to display more stars in the future. Anyway, okay, that looks good. Sorry, I'm trying to do two things at once. I can't talk and chew gum at the same time. There we go. Now you should have no trouble auto-guiding. That's much better. Okay. So let's call this B. You know what? It will do 2 minutes because I can. So anyway, we're not going to have too long to view this object because the orbit predicts it is very low in the west. I quickly chose my observing site tonight with that in mind, so I have a clear shot of the western horizon. I can follow this thing all the way down. But even so, it was at 15 degrees altitude a few moments ago when I started the webcast. It's going to be even lower, but even by now. So that's why I wanted to get on this as quickly as possible. So sorry for the hurried and cryptic webcast title for tonight. So anyway, I can't tell right now, honestly, if there is anything unexpected there or not. I don't see it, or I think I should be seeing it, relative to the stars that are available in my sky chart program. I can tell based on those stars that I am looking where I need to be looking. Basically right where this asteroid object, whatever it is predicted to be. And based on the designation he gave it, or the name he gave it a few different names. He kept changing it, saying, nope, I'm sorry, I messed up, it was this. But basically what he was doing is he was picking systematic names that are assigned by the Minor Planet Center. And he was just trying to pick one that was just a little bit into the future that hadn't been found yet, so that when something, so that if somebody looked it up, they wouldn't find anything that contradicted his orbital elements. But actually, by the time I took a look at the claim and looked up the name, the orbital elements did exist because something had been found. The provisional or the, not provisional, but, well, I guess, is that technically the provisional name? I forget. Anyway, the name that he gave it, the systematic name, is assigned in order of discovery. So whenever someone finds something and they report it to the Minor Planet Center, they hold that name. If that report is confirmed by other observers, independent observers, then it is actually officially given that name, and thus you have a name in order of discovery. So, yeah, the bottom line is that if something had been found then a few days ago, or even now, based on where this thing is, it's so far from Earth that for any telescope performing any sky survey right now to have found it, it would have to be massive. We're talking either a comet. A comet would be more likely based on the extreme eccentricity of the orbit. It's a comet-like orbit. So if it were a comet and it were that far from Earth, I mean, we're talking, I think it was over an AU in distance. I can't remember off the top of my head. I'd have to look it up again. Well, you know what? Actually, my SkyChart program should have that information, I think. Let's see. How far from Earth does it currently say it is? Ah, shoot. It doesn't tell me. Well, I'll look it up later. But it's a decent distance. I'm thinking over an AU. I want to say off the top of my head 1.8 AUs. Don't quote me. I could be wrong on that. For something to be observed that far away, it's either going to be massive, really, really big, like, in the top 100 of asteroid size, or a comet. And, yeah, I mean, I suppose it could be a comet, but the guy admitted later that it was a hoax. Still, the thing I don't think he understands, he's probably never done anything like that before. I've seen, other astronomers, especially young guys who are just getting into astronomy, do similar stunts, and usually they do it to entertain their friends or whatever. What they don't understand is that if this gets out and becomes viral online, people get seriously scared about this sort of stuff. They'll get frightened by it because they'll rationalize in their own minds why it's not a hoax, even though he said it was. They'll say, well, the government agents got to him, the CIA took over his account and made him confess, or they just took over his computer and typed the confession themselves, whatever. No one, well, I won't say no one, but a number of people are not going to believe your attraction. These things take on a life of their own, and there's just no taking it back once it's out there. So the only thing to do at that point is to follow it through to its logical end, which in this case is to actually observe the claimed position or the predicted position of the object and see if anything's there. So that's what we're doing right now. And I'm definitely looking where the object should be. I don't really see anything where it's predicted to be, and it is moving reasonably quickly. It's high eccentricity orbit, pretty close to perihelion at this point, so it would be moving with a swiftness. Even at that distance, we would see motion over a few minutes of time. And we're doing, what are we doing, 2-minute exposures here? Yeah. So between a couple images, you would see some motion of it. The black circles, I'm sure some people are already wondering this. These black circles here, 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 and really there's a large kind of faint fuzzy one up there. There's another one over here. These are just dust motes on the CCD. These have been there since I got this new camera, this ST2000. They've been there since day one. So if you look at some of my previous webcasts, you'll see these guys as well. This one also sometimes appears. Depends on the amount of illumination. It's fainter. It might be on the front window of the CCD chamber instead of on the CCD itself, which is why it's less focused. It's more diffuse. But those guys have been there since day one. Those aren't anything. I just always get that question, so I want to address that. So anyway, we'll take a look here for as long as we can tonight. It won't be very long. This won't be a very long webcast, just until this thing sets. I didn't bring all my power supplies out here, so the laptop battery's life is actually a limiting factor if I wanted to go later into the night. I got 1 hour of power on here, but that's going to be more than enough. This thing will have set by the time laptop battery power. But even so, like I said, this thing would be moving quick enough that if it were really there and it were really getting picked up, we would see motion when we put these frames back together. If you saw my previous webcast, we followed Comet Lovejoy for a bit. I think I did, was it 1.2 hours? 1.3 hours on that, something like that. I posted the time-lapse actually as a GIF animation. It was just easier and faster. And I posted that in the video description of the previous webcast. I was going to make it into a separate video, but sometimes my video editing software actually dims still pictures when you dump them into a video file. I don't know why that is. It might be some setting I've got wrong set wrong in Sony Vegas, but whatever the reason, it seems to darken the images a little bit, and I didn't want them to come out any darker than they already were in the individual pictures, so I just put it into a GIF file. Since they're grayscale images, you don't really lose any quality anyway. So anyway, that's in the previous video, the previous webcast video description if you want to go check that out. I also posted a stacked image from the pictures we took of Comet Lovejoy. And in that time-lapse, you can see a huge amount of motion over that, hour and change. And really, even between any two images, you can detect a slight amount of motion of the comet. Once you get to, 3 or 5 images distance from each other, and I think those were 60 seconds long, only 60 seconds, you can really see a lot of motion. The same would be true here. These images are 2 minutes long. After about, 5 or 10 minutes, at this image scale, you would see some motion if this thing were really there. I don't really see anything moving here. These are all probably just regular stars. But to confirm that, I'll be doing astrometry on the images collected tonight, looking at the very exact coordinates predicted for this object. And in order for something to be on a collision course with Earth, with that orbit it would have to be precisely where it's predicted to be. It couldn't be, say, off screen with the same velocity coming at us from, the same general direction, but still hit us. Because it's so far away, the distances even at this image scale, the distances from one side of the image to another in real terms of real space would be huge. And so in order for it to be, on a collision course, it would have to be pretty much exactly where it's predicted to be. So that's why I'm not having to go wide field here and kind of do a wide field search to try to pick something up, because it's, it's either really going to hit us or it's really not there at all. And yeah, obviously with the April 1st date, it's an April 1st joke. Har har. But yeah, I don't see anything moving here. Auto guiding's running well. So just to give you guys some idea, based on my SkyChart software showing where this thing's predicted to be, it would be somewhere right in here, almost right in the center of the image right now, if it were really there. But I'm not seeing anything. I'm not really surprised at all. Didn't honestly expect to, but just had to, follow up on this. You just can't create a hoax like that and hope to take it back simply by saying it's a hoax. I mean, for most people, yeah, they are going to dismiss it at that point, but there's a certain percentage of people who won't. And like I said, these things can take on a life of their own. Kyle Kaplan was a famous example of this from last year. Kyle was a PhD student at the University of Texas. I think that's right, University of Texas, somewhere in Texas, I think. McDonald Observatory. And he was bored one night while collecting images at the telescope, so he decided to film himself in a little video claiming that he had found some doomsday planet headed towards Earth, and he was showing images on the monitor of a star and saying that was the planet. And he went into the telescope dome, showed the telescope to show that, yes, he is an astronomer. He does have access to this big telescope. And at the end of the video, the very, very end of the video, he kind of revealed the hoax a couple different ways. I mean, in one shot, he showed an email he supposedly received from his supervisor telling him that, warning him not to photograph this thing, to get back to work doing what she was telling him to do. And then at that point, if you looked at the screen where this email came in, you could tell it was his email address that had sent it. It said, "From me to me." Then at the very end of the video, he had one of his friends show up and pretend to abduct him, and they were kind of laughing as they carried him out the door. It was obviously a joke. But some dishonest people took that entire video, which was probably about 20 minutes long. I don't remember exactly, but it was a long video, and they just trimmed those last few seconds so that you didn't see him getting fake abducted. And that made the whole thing look much more convincing to a lot of people. So even though he came out and admitted it was a hoax, there were a lot of people who tried to profit from maintaining the hoax, despite his admission. And you might be wondering, well, how can you profit from that? Well, on YouTube, you can ad partner with YouTube, and the more views you get, the more ad money you get. Now, I'm not an ad partner. I don't get any money from views on my videos, but a lot of people do. And so when they post videos declaring doomsday approaching, and they have video from what appears to be a real astronomer at a real observatory that they've cleverly, edited to make it look more authentic, they can get some serious cash. at least enough to make it worthwhile. So there is, real motivation to create hoaxes like that. And so when you give them ammunition like this, you're creating a real problem, because people do get scared by this stuff. I've met people who were scared by some of the doomsday theories surrounding Comet Element. So I just hope that whoever did this understands now the real ramifications and implications that a hoax like this brings. Because the only way to put it to bed now is to actually pull out a real telescope and actually look for it. And fortunately, the orbit was such that it is currently observable, just not easily so. Most professional observatories don't observe this low to the horizon. We're now, I'm just eyeballing here, I'm thinking we're probably below 10 degrees altitude. There are altitude limits on a lot of these big professional telescopes. You've got the dome itself, the lower lip of the dome, that the telescope obviously can't peer through. The mount itself may have some issues getting down to low altitude. So, if I tried to dial up itelescope.net, which I did, I thought, well, okay, maybe I can just deal with this easy. Just fire up a remote observatory on the internet with itelescope.net and get it. Well, most of the itelescopes have, pretty considerable altitude limits. You have to take into consideration, like 20 degrees on a lot of them. Well, this thing's lower than that by the time it gets really dark. One or two of the scopes have lower altitude limits, maybe 10 to 20 degrees, and I tried it on one of those, and it couldn't do it. So it's just too low. It's too hard to observe. So really, the only way to do it is to have a scope like mine that I can just pack up and take with me, go somewhere where I have an absolutely clear view of the western horizon, here in this case thanks to the Gulf of Mexico, and be able to observe it, where a lot of professional observatories or so I'll get off my soapbox now, but it's suffice to say it's not fun to have to come out and do this just for this. Oh, one other technical point I should add in here, because I know someone will bring it up if I don't. For tonight's observing, I did take off the infrared blocking filter off the camera, so we are viewing visible plus IR light. Any photon that camera can receive, it will receive tonight, just in case. Because I know I'll have someone come back and say, well, maybe it's only visible in infrared light. Okay, I understand some things basically are only observable in infrared light. If you might remember, a couple months back, we took a look at CW Leonis, and 6 months before that, we took a look at the same thing, CW Leonis. And both times, I demonstrated that you could really only see it when I showed it in infrared light. In visible light, it was invisible at the exposures we were using. So, but this camera is capable of going beyond visible light. So yeah, I'm not seeing anything moving here. Very nice little still image. I know the resolution's not great, but that's a trade-off to maximize sensitivity, which is what we want here. Plus, it maximizes sensitivity of moving objects in particular. The reason for that is, as an object is moving, if your exposure is, say, 2 minutes long, and every 60 seconds that object moves onto a new pixel. If you're moving your telescope at the rate of the stars, if it's tracking with the motion of the stars, which is what this telescope is currently doing, it's tracking at a sidereal rate, that object could be moving against the stars, which it would be in this case. And so let's say that every 60 seconds that object is moved onto a new set of pixels. Well, now it's contributing those photons onto that new set of pixels, and it's going to take some time to get above the natural noise level, the readout noise of those pixels. So you basically started the timer all over. You're not going to increase the brightness of the object by increasing the exposure at that point. past, say, 60 seconds. You can do a 2-minute exposure, but now it's just going to be a tiny little streak instead of a dot. And the streak is going to have the same brightness as a dot at the same exposure rate as the motion of that object. See what I'm saying? So when you bend pixels together, you buy yourself more time. Because now, if I bend 2 by 2, it's going to take twice as long for that object to move onto a new set of pixels. If I bend 3 by 3, which is what I'm doing right now, it's going to take 3 times as long for that object to move onto a new set of pixels, and for that timer essentially to start over in terms of getting above the read noise. So you maximize your sensitivity of moving objects by bending the pixels together. This is especially useful if you don't know de novo what the motion of the object is. In this case, we actually do. You know, we have a claimed orbit for this object, so it is theoretically possible to put a telescope onto a motion that matches that orbit, so that it stays on one set of pixels the entire time. Now, the LX200 Classic does not have that capability natively to track a set of orbital elements. I could develop software. That's something I want to do. That's kind of a long-term project idea, is to code up some software that will allow me to put in a set of orbital elements, and it will feed out commands to the telescope to keep it tracking on the position predicted by those elements. Similar to the way the satellite tracker software I use works. The telescope isn't natively, the LX200 Classic, the pre-GPS, pre-AutoStar models, the Magellan computer isn't natively capable of tracking satellites or the space station. Some of the newer telescopes have that capability, but this one does not. So there's a piece of software you can get for your laptop, excuse me, your laptop, that will send commands continuously to the telescope to keep it tracking on satellites, and it works quite well. That's how I've tracked satellites with this telescope, and you can go see some of those videos on this channel. But in theory, the same thing is possible with minor planets. I just haven't found software to do that with an LX200 yet. So if it doesn't exist, you can always make it yourself. Anyway, in lieu of that, for tonight, I'm just bending the pixels. But even so, I'm not seeing anything. Of course, just to be sure, I'll be stacking these images. The other interesting point on that is that if you know the orbit of an object that you're trying to take pictures of like this, and you have pictures like this that haven't been tracking on the object's position, just tracking at the sidereal rate, that's fine, as long as your exposure is not so long that it's moving way faster than your ability to collect its photons of light on a single set of pixels, like I described earlier. You can take those images in post and say, okay, based on the time these images were taken, I know that it should be at X and Y coordinates at time 1, X and Y coordinates at time 2, X and Y coordinates at time 3, for all the images, and align the images based on the predicted position of the orbit. IRIS software, IRIS, is available for free, and that has that functionality built in. You can tell it that you expected an object to be moving at, such and such a rate in the x-axis and such a rate in the y-axis, and it will look through your FITS file images, the raw FITS files here, and look at the timestamps on them. It's automatically embedded here by the computer every time it saves an image, and it will arrange those photos accordingly. It will align them based on the predicted position of the object. So then you can stack them together, and so that even though you weren't tracking the object as you were taking the pictures, you're now tracking the object as you're stacking the pictures, and you increase your signal-to-noise ratio again, even though you weren't tracking it when you were taking it. And with that, it's possible to detect moving objects that you didn't see in the individual exposures necessarily because they were so low down in the noise level. I've done that before with minor planets, with asteroids. It's quite easy to do, quite handy for trying to discover perhaps new main belt asteroids where you know approximately how quickly, a generic main belt asteroid should be moving. You can stack your images like that and make it a lot easier to see all the main belt asteroids in your image if you're shooting in that region of space. So I will utilize that strategy as well. So that if there's any way that this object exists, even if it's faint, by stacking these pictures in that way, I should be able to pull it out. So I'll make a second video about analyzing these objects. Hopefully I'll have time to get to that tomorrow. I can't guarantee it, so we'll just say sometime by about this weekend or so. Oh, hey, had a jump there in the guiding. Now, one issue that comes up, actually, which is kind of interesting, as you get lower and closer to the horizon, is you get differential amounts of atmospheric refraction from one side of the image to the other. The telescope is polar aligned right now, and so because of that, it's almost tilted on its side as it's following this region of sky down to the horizon. So the, let's see if I get this right. I don't know off the top of my head whether it's left or right side is going to hit the horizon first, but basically, you can think of the image relative to the horizon as being tilted not quite 90 degrees, but it's pretty darn well tilted. So the image will compress from left to right. You can see there where the guiding hiccuped. I think I'll be throwing that photo out of the stack. But anyway, the image will compress a little bit as you get closer to the horizon. As you get really close to the horizon, it will compress exponentially more. So about that time, you've basically done all the imaging you can anyway. Where one of the first times I really noticed that was with that Sighting Spring time lapse, where I was doing that webcast following the comet Sighting Spring as it approached the planet Mars. Followed that down basically to the horizon as well, and you could see in that time lapse the stars at the edges starting to work their way in towards the center. And basically, the reason that is because the upper edge, the edge furthest away from the horizon, is refracted less than the edge closest to the horizon. The edge closest to the horizon experiences the most atmospheric refraction, pushing the stars up away from the horizon, effectively. And so you get compression. It's the reason that the moon and the sun can look scrunched, flattened, squished a little bit as they rise or as they set. The lower limb of the moon or sun is experiencing more atmospheric refraction than the upper limb. It's the same thing. And actually, when you see the sun or moon, this is a cliche, but it's true fact that when you see the sun or the moon just touching the horizon, by eye, you're looking at the horizon, you see the sun just above the horizon, just the lower limbs touching the edge of the horizon. It's actually completely below the horizon geometrically. If there were no atmospheric refraction, you wouldn't see it at all. It's because of atmospheric refraction that you're able to see it. It's kind of just a fun little factoid. So yeah, that last picture came in good. Not sure if a bit of wind shook the scope or whatever. I'm not very well protected from the wind here, but it's not terribly windy tonight. couple questions I received I was just looking at. One is, how easily would I be able to see it? My feed looks a little bit grainy. Well, it is grainy because I'm bending the pixels here 3 by 3, but there are reasons, there's methods to my madness here. I won't go through it all again. I just got done describing all of that. Maybe you heard that. But there is a reason why I'm making it grainy, per se. It's because it's actually a way of guaranteeing that I'd be able to detect moving objects like this. Keeps the signal of whatever it is on the same set of pixels for a reasonable amount of time, so that I can do, say, 2-minute exposures without worrying about reaching the point where I'm temporarily oversampling it by time, I guess you would say, because if it moves and forms a streak, you're no longer improving the signal-to-noise ratio by just making it a longer streak. If it's below your signal-to-noise ratio as a streak, you're just not going to see it, and increasing the time is not going to help that. But if you bend the pixels together, you buy yourself more time. So that's the reason I'm doing that. And then when I stack the images, they'll be stacked using the published orbit of this object as a way of aligning the images, so that you're, again, adding the images properly such that you can be increasing the signal-to-noise ratio of the object on a single set of pixels in the final stacked image. So even if you don't really detect it in individual images, as long as you're picking up those photons of light over time, you would get above the signal-to-noise ratio, again, as long as it's stacked properly. So that's what I'll be doing in Iris. And I'll check the very precise location of where it's predicted to be using astrometry. And I'll show you guys where it had been predicted to be throughout the imaging session we do tonight. That'll all be done in analysis afterwards. So I guess, unfortunately, I'm trying to address this as unbelievably thoroughly as possible, because obviously if it's a hoax and there's nothing there, there's nothing to detect, so you're debunking it simply based on the fact that there's nothing there. And so there's always going to be the criticism, well, what if you just couldn't detect it? So I'm doing literally everything that is physically possible to do to maximize the chances of detection. And we've already collected, now at the end of this image, I'll have 30 minutes of usable images. There's one we got to toss out because the tracking got bumped. But at the end of this image, we'll have 30 minutes of usable imaging time on this object. So even if it weren't picked up in the individual images, stacking those images by aligning them based on the orbit of the object, it should definitely come out. If there's anything there, because this, position is so close to the horizon after nightfall, your major professional observatories wouldn't even be able to observe this. Their altitude limits would be too high. I mean, I'm getting down in the grass here, and I can do that because, I've got a portable telescope. It's big, but it's portable. I can set it up like I am right now, facing the water, so I have complete access to the horizon. And there's no dome, there's no observatory dome in my way, the lower lip of the dome or anything like that. There's nothing in my way. I can go down as low as physically possible. And so, if this object really were there, and somebody really did discover it in the last few days, as claimed, they would have had to do so the same way, by getting down in the grass. What you're talking about is a region of the sky where amateur astronomers dominate. That is where amateur astronomers tend to make the discoveries that the professionals really miss. It's these marginal positions of looking where professional sky surveys don't necessarily always bother to look. Professional sky surveys cover good chunks of the sky very quickly, and it is extraordinarily difficult to beat them head on, as an amateur astronomer. But if you look in places they aren't looking, because they either can't or won't look there because they're non-optimal, it's not optimal to be looking this close to the horizon for a variety of reasons. And in many cases, it's not a lot of these observatories. So amateurs can take up that task, and they do. That's why, for instance, if you remember back in the Comet Ison days, Comet Ison, after it had its conjunction with the Sun on the way to perihelion, when was it? Back in August of that year? Or was it September? It was recovered by Bruce Gary, an amateur astronomer, and he was able to recover it because he was able to get down really low to the horizon and observe in locations that wouldn't bother or couldn't. And so a lot of people seem to be surprised by the fact that he recovered it. Even he himself, I think, at one point expressed some degree of surprise, but it's really not that surprising when you realize the logistics behind the situation. That sort of area, low to the horizon, is where amateurs dominate. And so this is now me taking up that mantle, I guess, trying to find something. And obviously we're picking up a lot of stars here. Not having any real trouble with light pollution just drowning out the image here in these 2-minute images that are bin 3x3. I mean, that's really kind of sensitive now with 3x3 binning. Even a 2-minute image becomes quite powerful. But because I'm facing out west here, I'm not really looking directly into any light domes or anything. So even though this area, as you might hear behind me with cars going by, it's fairly populated, but I'm actually looking in an area, I'm looking basically right at darkness. I mean, I'm looking in an area that just doesn't have any light domes. All the population is either to the east, to the north, or to the south of me. But west, you're fine. You're looking out over the Gulf of Mexico. So, anyway, let's see. How are we doing on power here? We're down to 39% on the battery here, so I'm going to have to wrap up here in a minute. And it's getting lower and lower to the horizon. But yeah, I'm not seeing anything, so preliminary judgment on this is that there's nothing there. But just to be extra sure, just to be as thorough as possible, I'll be doing another video, an analysis video of these images afterwards. You know, doing everything I can to try and locate it, assuming it were real. And yeah, again, I apologize that the quality of the image is not the best because I am binning it here like this. But what you're really interested in here is not quality; it's sensitivity. I'm perfectly willing to sacrifice the color information if I get more sensitivity out of it, which is what I'm doing. The last webcast I did with that Comet Lovejoy is the same deal. We were binning it just like this, and you could see just how much of the tail I was able to pick up that I wasn't able to pick up in equally long exposures or even longer exposures at 1x1 binning. So this is really the way to go in terms of trying to get the maximum sensitivity possible. Let's see if there were any other questions. Don't see anything. Am I missing anything here? Sorry. Kind of intruding on the image. Nope. All right, well, I guess that's going to be just about doing it for us here. We'll take this last picture here just for good measure. Yeah, if it'll let me, I might take one more just after this so I have a nice even 40 minutes. Just because I'm OCD like that, and I like a nice round number. Unfortunately, we're going to have to kick out one of the images that got bumped. Oh no, here comes a truck with his headlights right at me, so I might have to miss this one too. Oh dear, yeah, that messed everything up. Well, that might just have to do it for us for tonight then. Sorry. Yeah. That's what happens when a headlight comes right by. Plus, I think we're getting to the point where it's setting, basically. Yeah, we're losing it here. Yeesh. Yeah, I'm going to call that good. All right, folks. Well, that does it for this webcast. As I said, I'll be stacking these images, analyzing these images, doing everything I can to find something that doesn't exist. But if it did exist, we'd be finding it. I think we can all rest assured that was an April Fool's joke come early, and I think most people realize that. But just in case anyone tries to, I don't know, revive this hoax or give it new life, make it go viral, you can now say you saw where that object should have been and you didn't see anything. Have a nice night and clear skies.